Alright, so the financial markets, yeah, they've been going through it lately, like really taking hits left and right, and people all over the globe are watching as this economic roller coaster just keeps spiraling. Over in Asia, everything dropped hard, and in Australia, almost $150 billion got wiped off in under an hour. Hong Kong's markets fell by around 10%, and it's not looking good anywhere. Investors are in panic mode because of Trump's next-level aggressive trade tariffs that could very well spark a worldwide recession, and yeah, it's that serious. Trump basically came out and said he doesn't want things to fall apart, but sometimes you gotta take bitter medicine to fix what's broken.
I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. And we have such a horrible, we have been treated so badly by other countries because we had stupid leadership that allowed this to happen.
Which sounds wild considering the stakes. China didn't waste time clapping back. They already slapped their own tariffs in response, going toe-to-toe fast. But what about Europe? What's the European Union doing? That's the big question, because right now things are pretty quiet from their end. While the markets have been free-falling for 3 straight days since Liberation Day, the US S&P 500 is down almost 14%, Europe's Stoxx 600 dropped by nearly 13%, and Asia's not looking much better with China's main index sliding about 8%. And yeah, all fingers are pointing at Trump's brutal new tariff wave as the cause.
It's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. China, first row, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA. So we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be because we never charged anybody anything. But now we're going to charge.
So in case you missed it, Trump added a 10% tariff on basically all imported goods coming into the US and then tacked on extra penalties for any country he thinks is being shady or not trading fair. He's calling it reciprocal tariffs, and he's going after countries where the US runs big trade deficits, but those numbers he's using, super sketchy. Like for example, he's claiming Vietnam has a 90% tariff on American goods, when in reality it's more like 9.4%. So yeah, not even close. Vietnam, China, and Cambodia got hit the hardest. China didn't waste time, they fired back with 34% tariffs on US products, and considering how huge the trade relationship is between them and the US, that move carries weight. We're talking about $583 billion in total trade between the two. The US exports $143 billion in goods to China, but imports a massive $438 billion back. So yeah, this is a heavyweight fight. Vietnam though, totally different vibe. They basically waved the white flag and said they're removing all trade barriers with the US instead of retaliating. Their take is that the US isn't really hurting Vietnam's economy but its own consumers. Why? Because Vietnam isn't just a random exporter. They're a massive player in the global supply chain, a key manufacturing hub for names like Adidas, Lululemon, and Nike. And Nike, by the way, makes more than half of its shoes in Vietnam. So yeah, you mess with Vietnam, you mess with your own sneaker game.
The EU has been very tough over the years. I always say it was formed to really do damage to the United States in trade. That's the reason it was formed. It was formed with all of the countries from Europe, I guess most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And they formed together to create a little bit of a monopoly situation, to create a unified force against the United States for trade.
But let's zero in on Europe now, because Trump's been calling out the European Union a lot lately. He's accusing them of freeloading hard and being awful when it comes to trade. And the tariffs from the EU, they come in a neat little package with 3 parts. First 25% on aluminum and steel, then 25% on car imports, and finally 20% on pretty much everything else. And don't think that's just symbolic. The EU does serious business with the US. In 2024 alone, the EU shipped over 530 billion euros worth of goods to the US, while only buying back 333 billion. That's a 198 billion euro trade surplus, and Germany is sitting right in the middle of it. Why? Because cars are a huge deal. Vehicles are the EU's second biggest export to the US, making up close to 10% of all exports. So that 25% car tariff, Yeah, it lands like a punch right to the core of Germany's industry. So what's Europe doing about this? So far, the Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has offered to open up talks with the US about a potential free trade deal. But the real question is whether Trump's even down to negotiate. Because until now, the EU's only responded to the first part of Trump's tariffs. That first bundle got hit back with plans to bring back up to 26 billion euros worth of tariffs on iconic American brands. Think Harley-Davidson bikes, bourbon whiskey and classic blue jeans. You know, the usual stuff that gets slapped first. But bundle 2 and 3, still nothing. Brussels is still trying to get its act together. There's no solid plan, no unified move yet, and that's a big problem. See, when it comes to trade, the European Commission has the final word, not the individual countries. They don't get a veto. So here's what's on the table next. The EU has basically got 3 ways it could go from here. First option is doing nothing, like literally nothing, just try and talk things out, maybe score some tariff reductions or exemptions. They might also try to soften the impact by tweaking stuff like interest rates or adjusting the money supply. That's what monetary policy is for, to keep things steady. This route would hurt the least up front, but if Trump sees no fight back, he's likely to get more bold and demand more concessions later. That's the risk. Second option is to go for limited targeted tariffs. This would mean hitting back where it hurts for Trump, like Republican strongholds or companies that are tight with his administration. For instance, the EU could go after soybeans from Louisiana, where Speaker Mike Johnson is from. But this move's a double-edged sword. It might look like Europe's scared to go all in, which just gives Trump more power. That's basically what happened before. The EU taxed bourbon, and Trump clapped back, threatening a 200% tax on European spirits. Eventually, the EU ends up stuck between going full force or backing off. Which brings us to the third option. That's the big one. Go full trade war mode.
So many Europeans feel utterly disheartened by the announcement from the United States. Let me be clear, Europe did not start this confrontation. We think it is wrong. But my message to you today is that we have everything we need to protect our people and our prosperity.
Throw down broad, proportionate tariffs across the board on US imports. For example, the EU could just slap a flat 20% tax like the US did. It would hurt in the short term, no doubt, but it'd also show they're not playing. That kind of pressure could be what finally gets Trump to the negotiating table. Now here's where things get spicy. The EU's got some real leverage, and it's not just in goods. When you look at trade overall, the EU has a €157 billion surplus in goods, but it runs a €109 billion deficit in services, especially digital services. And guess who dominates there? US tech. The European Commission hasn't said names out loud, but France didn't hold back. They're calling for action against companies like Apple, Google, and Meta. And now the EU has a major legal weapon ready. It's called the Anti-Coercion Instrument. With it, the EU can go way beyond tariffs. They can delay or deny US business licenses, block access to public contracts, lock out intellectual property rights, and even block investments. That's not just economic pushback, it's a strategy for defending European independence. Hey, real quick, if you're vibing with this kind of breakdown, drop a like and hit that subscribe button. It seriously helps more people get the real story behind the headlines. So here's what's probably gonna happen. We'll land somewhere between option 2 and 3. Expect to see tariffs hit cars, plus some serious regulatory heat on American digital services. The EU has tools like the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act, and while they're not tariffs, they pack a punch. The DMA targets tech gatekeepers like Google, Apple, Meta, and Amazon by forcing them to open up and stop favoring their own products. The DSA, on the other hand, holds them accountable for what happens on their platforms and how they handle data. Those two moves could seriously mess with US tech companies without even starting a formal trade war. And I'd also expect the EU to roll out a roadmap showing how things will escalate if talks go south. They'll probably hold off on France's push to use the anti-coercion tool immediately, but you better believe it's sitting there ready to go if needed. This whole thing is turning into a long game, a real test of who blinks first. Can the EU stay solid and united long enough to push back hard, or will some countries dip out and cut their own deals with Trump? And how long until Trump starts feeling the heat from a slowing economy and falling approval ratings? We're already seeing big protests across the US. If the pressure keeps piling on, Trump might not have a choice but to come back to the table. What we really need now is for the EU to come through strong, with one voice, no solo missions, no mixed signals. A clear plan, unity and some smart plays to spread out trade partnerships. We gotta build stronger ties with places like Mercosur, India and Canada, so we're not stuck like this next time. But what do you think Europe's best move is? Let me know in the comments. And if you're curious about where the EU could be headed in the future, check out our video on how a 4-tiered EU system could look with new members like Canada or even some North African countries. And before you bounce, don't forget to support us on Patreon. You'll get to vote on our video ideas each week. And big shout out to our top supporters, Jan Shia, Christian, Peter, HVD, Bijite Europe, Stefan and Mr. Robot. Peace out.